Hi everyone, thank you very much for joining today. As many of you know, I'm Graham Richardson-Locke, and welcome to our second series of FESPA Coffee Breaks. It's great to be back for the third in our new series. If you joined us for the last webinar, you'll know that I've broadened my role at FESPA to be Head of Associations and Technical Lead. As a member of the senior management team, I'm responsible for supporting our international member associations and continuing to develop technically useful material to support FESPA's specialty print communities. I'd also like to let you know that I've been working in screen and large format digital printing for more than 35 years. I initially trained as a screen printer, and my career in print has given me experiences in management and directorships in point of sale, textiles and military electronics before I came to join the FESPA team. I believe in the value of networking and know that my skills have been enhanced by taking part in a host of events and seminars that have been supported by FESPA, which, as an international specialty print trade federation, continues to focus its efforts on knowledge sharing and community building within the screen and wide format digital print landscape. FESPA's foundation 59 years ago, its goal has been to help print businesses using both screen and digital printing to advance and take advantage of the latest technology. We aim to keep today's session to about an hour, as we understand that your time is limited. We hope you'll benefit from your participation and you'll find some useful tips to build on that will support you in this disruptive and challenging market. I'm now going to share with you the topic and questions slide. So thank you, Kelly. So as we consider today's session, I'm pleased that we'll get to benefit from the experience of a sustainability consultant and a talented printer. The first of which is Clare Taylor, who's a chartered environmentalist and founder of Clare Taylor Consulting. And the second, Nathan Swinson, Managing Director of ImageCo, the creative graphics printer based in Leeds in the UK. I'll let them introduce themselves to you in a minute. And our topic today is circular thinking, how to prepare for a reduce, reuse, recycle business model. In this FESPA Coffee Break, we'll focus our discussion on how to get started with circular thinking to preserve resources and extend the useful life of our materials. The response to climate change demands that we reevaluate our working practices. We already understand that all of our production materials and processes have an impact on the environment. By considering the life cycle of our printed products, we can find ways to increase their lifespan or reuse potential. With our global population approaching 8 billion and forecast to increase by another 2 billion by 2050, it's clear that our planet cannot continue to give up endless resources, and we have to act to reduce carbon at an unprecedented rate. We're seeing growing consumer demand and the added pressure of carbon taxing, both when buying raw materials and disposing of them. There's a great mass of information you can access. I think it's worth looking at Ellen MacArthur Foundation's Circulytics tool, or learn for free via the edX SDG Academy X platform, or maybe visit the Donut Economics Action Lab website, or pick up a copy of Donut Economics by Kate Rayworth. I'm now going to share with you our panelist slide. So you can see here our email addresses are all available. So should you have follow-up questions after the session that we don't manage to get to in Q&A, then please take a note of our contact details. And you'll also see this again at the end of the session. Okay, Claire, so thank you so much for joining today, and Nathan, to you too. So maybe you could just start off with a bit of an introduction, that'd be great.
Thank you, Graham, and thank you for inviting me to be here today. As Graham said earlier, I'm a chartered environmentalist. I'm also an IEMA registered environmental auditor and an ESOS lead assessor, that last one being particularly for energy. I've run my consultancy for 24 years, but prior to that, I was on the print buying side, and my final role in that was head of marketing services at Cable and Wireless Communications, where I had additional responsibility for environmental improvement within the supply chain. And I am very much looking forward to hearing from Nathan today, because I know he's been doing a lot of exciting things. So over to you, Nathan.
Thanks, Claire. Thanks, Graham. Morning, everyone. So I'm Nathan Swinson. I'm Managing Director of ImageCo in Leeds. We specialise in wide format print, signage, retail display and POS. I've been Managing Director for the last 6 years, having been at ImageCo for 18 years. I'm also on the board of FESPA UK, where I've been recently assigned to head up sustainability. I've been looking at sustainability at ImageCo now for the last 3 years or so, acknowledging that we have a big problem in our industry. Everything from the energy that we use to the materials, and I think the biggest problem that we now face is kind of the circularity, which is what we're going to cover today.
Brilliant, thank you. So before we get into the questions, I'm going to ask you to please take a minute to complete the poll that I'm about to launch. Just gives us a better idea of who's with us today and what areas of the business you're involved with. So I'll launch the poll now. I'll leave that open for like a minute, and then if you could fill that out, that'd be brilliant. Okay, so numbers are crunching away here. We've got actually the majority of our audience are wide format digital printers, and quite a high proportion of signage printers to our usual mix. So glad to see some screen printers in there as well. Okay, that's great, thank you. I think that gives us a sense of who we've got with us. So without further delay, let's get into our questions. So to start off, I think the best place to start here, Claire, maybe is for you to lead on giving a sort of an overview of what is the circular economy.
Yes, sure, Graham. It's a way of breaking the traditional linear system we've had, where you harvest resources, mine resources, you make something, you use it, and then you dispose of it. It's very inefficient. And a much more efficient way is to be circular. So at every stage of producing something, we think about what we can do to continue that circle. So for example, with a computer, producing the raw material, there's a lot of waste from mining the metals and things. In manufacturing, there's a lot of waste. End of life is often brought too early because of constant upgrades and changes, and then they're not very easy to recycle. So we need to change how we think through that cycle. And instead of just thinking of your own stage and who you're passing it on to design and make things in such a way that they're easy to reuse, easy to upgrade, easy to recycle, so that everything you can is used, nothing is wasted, nothing is thrown away. And even in print, although many of our substrates are very easy to recycle, there are treatments that can stop this and make it difficult. So it applies to print as much as everything else.
Okay. Nathan, so what does, what is the circular economy and kind of what does it mean for you?
Yeah, it's like Claire said, it's about reusing, reducing and recycling. The problem that we face in the industry is the use of the various materials, especially in wide format print. You have so many substrates. Some are made from recycled materials but aren't recyclable. And then you've got to factor in the ink, the adhesives and everything. And that is how how do we work to become more circular? So how can we prepare for that in the future? Because it needs to happen. Right now, there's different waste streams, and the problem we face as well in the industry is having a small print shop. Not, you know, the big recyclers like polypropylene, for example, they won't recycle in small amounts. You've got to look at the bigger quantities and in bulk. So it's how do we kind of prepare for that by either simplifying materials, making sure you're using the right ink, and then also looking at the machines as well. What are they made from? Are they made from recycled plastic? Which a lot of them are now, especially with HP printers and such.
Yeah. Okay. Claire, where is a good place to start the process of circular printing?
At the very beginning, at the design stage, including the specification of the materials, because the earlier on in the life cycle you begin, the greater the difference it's possible to make. So if, for example, you're designing store displays, you're thinking about what materials they're made of, but also thinking about designing them so they can be disassembled and refurbished so that the framework can be reused, and then that at the end of life, they can be recycled. This, from what I learned, can be perhaps a bit of an issue because printers are more likely to receive instructions from designers rather than working more collaboratively using the printer's expertise. So I would be interested to hear from Nathan on what his experience is on that.
Yeah, I mean,
I think, yeah, it's a good point you raise, is how we engage with design and whether design is leading us or we need to be pulling that interaction. So Nathan,
I think it's a tricky one because a lot of designers aren't aware of the print process and print materials, so they can't specify what they don't know about. I mean, from my point of view, we kind of sit in the middle. So I'm working with suppliers on new materials and what's recyclable and what's not, but also working with design agencies and advising them. So they'll give us a brief of a window display, for example, with certain products, and a lot of it, you know, these designers just come up with these ideas that aren't actually feasible. So you've kind of got to rein it in and then advise back on if it has to be kind of recyclable, then what can it be? And the best way to do that is just be really simple in the specification. But if they don't know, then they can't specify that. So I think it's important for printers to have that three-way conversation with the suppliers and with them. And like we do, we sit exactly in the middle and we're researching all the time on what can be done and what's achievable.
Yeah, that it makes so much sense that we kind of sometimes have maybe expectations of people knowing detail that is just in our domain rather than theirs, and leading is the way, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
Okay, so in order to kind of get this to kick off with this, who do we need to get involved in our business to start circular thinking? Claire, do you want to speak in the kind of from the macro, and then Nathan can give us his experience?
Yes, of course. It needs to be the entire value chain involved. So the customer, substrate suppliers, consumable suppliers, equipment manufacturers, printers, end customers who may well have the ultimate end of life product, and recyclers. And they need to all be working together. And there are some really exciting changes happening in this. For example, Nathan was talking about inks, and inks tended to be developed maybe with the substrate suppliers and with the equipment suppliers, but now there's a lot more collaboration between the recyclers and the de-inking industry and the inks to try and make that more circular. So there's a lot going on to make that work, but everyone does have to work together to make it effective. The printer being in the middle, being able to advise customers, choose suppliers, deal with recyclers, is, as Nathan was saying, in a strong position to gather that expertise and to work with everybody.
Nathan, who's involved in your process?
It's exactly that. It's pretty much everyone, like I said before. So it's going, maybe starting with the suppliers. If those suppliers aren't producing the materials that we need to recycle, then we can't specify that. And if they don't work, then we can't specify that. We then need to kind of go from what's achievable on what machines can print what material, and then go back to the designers and advise that. I think also a big part of it is education of staff. In my experience, I've been kind of looking at all these new materials and new printers, obviously the latex, but then I'm thinking, does everyone know, as a staff, fully aware of the benefits of machines? It's okay printing on these recycled materials, but are they going into the correct recycling areas? And are they going where they should be going to be recycled? So it's a big task really, and it's quite a challenging one as well. But what we're looking at the minute is ISO qualification, the ISO 14001, which part of that is a mentor. So they will come in and, rather than kind of me banging on about things, they will help advise staff and guide on what should be done as well. So it's a big educational thing, and there's a lot of parties involved.
And that allows you to kind of formalize and embed the process of continuous improvement in your environmental performance, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, Claire, do you have any questions for Nathan on this part, out of interest?
No, it'd be interesting to find how you're finding the process, because you've been doing quite a lot. In a saying informal way sounds derogatory, but I don't mean it that way. You've been doing an awful lot of work, but this is your first time actually formalizing the process, and that is built very much ISO 14001 on a circular theme, a Plan, Do, Check, Act theme. Are you finding that helpful?
Yeah, it's massively helpful, because I'm no expert. I'm just doing out this because I've acknowledged a problem. So I'm finding new things all the time, and I need to really get my head around the recyclability of products. That's the next big thing is what can be recycled. I've got a good understanding, but it's a little bit more deep than we first thought. And especially now, like I mentioned before, with inks, combined adhesives, and whereas you might have like a vinyl, for example, which is recyclable, a polypropylene vinyl, and add a laminate that's not recyclable, then suddenly it becomes a broken system. It's not doable. Yeah. So it's making sure everyone in that chain, especially in our factory, know exactly what they're doing and what laminate goes where, because they all look the same at the end of the day, and it's difficult without knowing exactly what goes what, and what, passing that information on what can be recycled together. Then it becomes once that's achieved, then it becomes easier.
And I think customers are, larger organizations, these form part of their scope 3 emissions. Often the kind of their carbon reduction is critically important. I know that for us at FESPA, like you talk about laminates and creating waste streams that are more straightforward and manageable, so that they can be recycled. And I know we're starting to think about some of the lovely special effects that we've used, the high build varnishes, the laminates, and I don't know, I'm starting to take a different perspective on how we're going to express ourselves as an organization in creative print moving forward, because I think you can very easily, we work in a very creative part of the print industry. But sadly, it's not all good creativity when you can't process at end of life. So it's,
well, that's the thing. There's some beautiful products out there, and they look great. Like say from a creative perspective, and in store they look great. But then, can you recycle them? No. We've had several briefs recently. One job we won, which went to Canada and the USA, rolling out to stores, and it had to be recyclable on polypropylene with a water-based adhesive. On latex as well, it had to be specified on latex, and we got the contracts on the back of that. And they themselves are a print shop. They couldn't actually do it because they didn't have the technology, the latex technology at the end of the day. And the latex itself, we talk about laminates. Like in the past, we've done self-adhesive wallpapers off around Peacock stores. Like years ago when I was on the print floor, we'd do thousands of meters a month of vinyl with laminate adhesive. none of that were recyclable. But now with latex, there's maybe not a need to have the laminate. And if you look at more FSC wallpaper, for example, the water-based ink onto the paper, it becomes recyclable. And then you got the benefits of the latex as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think going back probably, I must be 15 years when I did an exhibition for Puma at the Design Museum. We had over 300 panels to print, and they wanted materials that could go into their straightforward kind of waste stream. So they used, the structures were just raw pine, and then we used honeycomb board for the rest of the exhibition. And it was a really interesting process. Even back then, we were using a UV flatbed for doing the print work, which I think is, at the time, was the best offer. But I think, yeah, things are moving on. So with UV, the issue is once it forms part of the product, the de-inking side is more problematic, right, than a latex.
Yeah, it can be recycled. I did get some information from EFI, but I can't remember what that was. But there's a couple of recycling streams, but it's not widely recyclable. Even though we do a lot of event and exhibition work, and we're using Zanita board now, like from Untitled, in replacements of some of the big, whereas before like maybe use Tetna, we still use Tetna, but you've got the Foamex, the vinyl, the mag tape, where now we're using a self-contained structure out of the Zanita board and kind of engineering it on the Zund, so it can go in paper waste. So one thing we're looking at the minute is to create a structure that's not actually printed on, but then you can maybe either print a low-tack polypropylene vinyl to put graphics on, or simply just pin a poster on there. So that's something we're looking at the minute for future events. Something so you can almost take all those components off and recycle them separately.
Well, I suppose the virtue signaling of doing stuff that is overtly, obviously, sustainably produced, so you can tell that, like the exposed edge of the honeycomb board, those kind of things.
Yeah, it looks the part.
Actually, can ironically, you have this kind of, if you're a luxury brand, you might struggle with seeing fluffy edged cardboard at the end of your graphics, but in many cases, I think there is a real opportunity to turn those things to your advantage rather than trying to disguise them. So I suppose we've kind of already started moving into the area of what you need to take into account. And Claire, I think you were going to talk a bit about simplification. So reducing mixed materials, which we've been discussing. So perhaps it's a good time to bring you in.
Yeah, what needs to be taken into account is kind of everything that you've been talking about, because you do need to simplify, because the more different processes you add to a substrate, the more different materials you laminate to something, the harder it is to recycle. And having things that are easy to disassemble so you can keep materials separate more easily helps. Having things where, as we were talking about earlier, you've got your main structure, for example, on displays. You can take off, recycle a paper or vinyl, recyclable vinyl thing that can be kept separate for recycling, put on the new one so as you're not wasting a whole item. Using the substrates that can be more easily recycled. And also looking at the huge range that there is currently of plastic type materials. There are lots of different ones. They're really hard to tell apart by the time you're at the end customer side. So very hard to separate out into recycling streams, even if they are recyclable. So just at every stage, thinking about end of life, what's easy for the printer with their waste material to separate, but also what's easier for the end customer, for the store, for whoever, to disassemble, recycle, separate out, and working with them to make sure that they're well aware of this.
I think one of the problems as well, certainly with POS, for example, is sending it out to store, and then how does the store staff, recycle it? Where does it go? Because often, if they've got a small recycling bin, it's not going. The regular recyclers aren't going to take it. So one thing we're looking at, speaking to a few people, is like a take back scheme. on graphics. So we would send it out in a cardboard tube or box. They would send it back to us, and we would kind of collect that in bulk and then send to a local recycler. Same again for small printers who are only using small amounts. If we can have like a central hub where one big supplier came and collected all that and then took that away for recycling, that's another option.
And that feeds into the polluter pays. The polluter pays and the producer pays, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think legislative accountability is not too far down the road. Of course, there are lots of environmental protection legislation points already up and running, but there's only more to come, I think. Okay.
It's also a very efficient way of doing it because you're centralizing things. And if you're doing it take back as you deliver new things in, so you're backloading things, it's an efficient use of the transport.
There's a carbon issue to be addressed there as well, though.
Yeah. That's why you need to do it on return journeys if you can.
Yeah,
for sure. Okay, so why is circular thinking and production important? Claire?
There's two reasons around this. One is the environmental reason, and the other you touched on earlier is business-wise. So environmentally, even renewable resources are being used faster than we can replenish them. At the current rate that we're using things, we need to have about 1.6 Earths at the moment to maintain the current living standards. We have Earth Overshoot Day, which this year I think is towards the end of July, and that's when we've reached the capacity of this planet to support everyone living at the current standards. And that's been moving
through the year, so you get to that point.
Yes.
Right, okay, wow.
And that's been happening earlier and earlier each year, except last year, when everything changed for a while, but now we're going back again. So we need to stop. Basically, the Earth is our savings fund, and instead of living off the interest, we're drawing down the capital. We need to stop doing that. And then making things uses energy, water, chemicals, etc. And recycling them uses less of those. Reusing them uses less still. So it helps conserve energy and water as well as the materials. But the way we're doing things at the moment makes it quite hard to recycle. We don't design with the end in mind, and that's what we need to do. And also we need to avoid pollution. And again, original manufacturing tends to be more polluting than obviously reusing, or in most cases recycling. So the environmental reasons are quite large, and because it's so important, there is legislation, existing legislation, and more that's coming in. So the main thing is extended producer responsibility, and that's been around for quite a while. And it's a way of making the producer responsible for their products at the end of life, and that encourages them to design things in a more sustainable way, manufacture things in a more sustainable way. And there are many areas of industry already covered by that, and that's growing. So, for example, in the UK, there's end-of-life vehicles to encourage the vehicle manufacturers to use fewer materials to make the vehicles easier to disassemble, easier to recycle, to use all those valuable metals again. And we've got it in batteries, we've got it in all sorts of different things. And we've had it in packaging waste, but that wasn't the same kind of thing. People were collecting data and buying packaging recovery notes to cover the cost of recycling, but it didn't really drive that change that's being looked for. So the new system is quite different. And whereas the onus was on everyone down the line in the old one, with this new one, it is very much on the producer. And that's likely to be the brand owner or the importer. The consultation has only just finished on it, so we know about what's proposed and what's in the consultation, but not what finally comes out of it. But it will cover, although it's called packaging, it will cover quite a few display products, anything that's used for presentation of goods which isn't part of the final product. And it introduces modulated fees so that if packaging is readily recyclable, it will attract a lower fee to encourage people to look at packaging, obviously, that fulfills its function of protecting the goods, but is easier to recycle and can go along the life in a more circular way. And the thing that's really new in this is it includes responsibility for litter. So it's not just for the disposal of litter that the brand owners will be responsible, or importers, but for the collection of it and the treating of it and all the costs that go into clearing up those huge mountains of litter that appear in our parks on sunny days. And again, that will drive messaging, get the people to put more messaging on the packaging, one hopes, to encourage people to recycle, as well as making it more recyclable in the first place. And this theme is continuing throughout a lot of the legislation that's coming through. It's been driven from the EU. We've inherited it. It's carrying on, where we've got the waste and resources strategy that came out in 2018. And that's got the life cycling approach, the circular economy approach, completely embedded. So we've got sustainable production, and it's covering quite a wide range of areas. So from an environmental point of view, it's a really exciting time. From a manufacturer's point of view, it's going to be interesting. It's going to be challenging. There's a lot of learning to do, but it puts people who are already thinking of it in a really strong position to help those brand owners, designers, manufacturers respond to all of this.
Yeah, agreed. Nathan, do you think, so your business you overtly market the business on the basis of working hard to offer a more sustainable product mix? You've got, great marketing materials that support your behavior, and it seems to me that it's utterly bound into your culture. There's, this is not a light touch for you. This is a deep commitment that you're making. Do you find that, in over the many years that I've worked in print, I've had people say, oh, I'd like to be environmental, but I can't pay a premium for the materials. I've had all sorts of kind of statements made that have downgraded the value of offering responsibly made product. How are you seeing the cost side of, the premium cost for materials against how are you resolving that with your clients?
Yeah, well, when we first started looking at all the alternatives, we found there was quite a high price increase on, for example, recycled fabric for light boxes against the regular fabric. But now I think everything's come down more in line with price. I mean, we wanted to make the switch, but at the same time, we couldn't take that hit by just suddenly switching out materials and charging the same price. And I think now customers they have acknowledged, like I say, the marketing's worked well. We're not greenwashing, we're actually actively doing it, and customers will pay for that now. At the same time, we're not going to just put a price tag on it because it's environment. If the price is in line with what it should be, the ink, for example, the media, we'll just charge the same price. It's my personal thing. It's never been a business plan as such, although it's turning out to be quite a good move. But it's me personally that's made that decision, acknowledging the mess we're seeing in the oceans right now. If you look back 70 years, this wasn't a thing. So now, it's just that conscious move towards doing that. But like I said, the customers we're working with now are coming to us because we're sustainable and because we have that product portfolio. We have taken a bit of a hit in some materials, but we can factor that in. But if look at some products where you don't have to use laminate, you're suddenly using one product, whereas before you're using two, so you've lost a cost there for an additional product where it's simplified.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that if this new legislation comes in the format that's expected, that will help overcome any cost differentials because the end of life costs will be lower.
No, absolutely. Yeah, and we're seeing that there's a lot of innovation as well out there from the suppliers. I think there needs to be more of that, and it's not just, let's say, it's not just for now. This is how it has to be from here on in. No doubt about it. If you look in 20, 30 years time to our grandkids and their future, we don't want it to be a mess like it is now. The population is growing, people are getting messier, the kids are getting less educated. It's a tip, and people have got to lead by example and show the way forward. And there's got to be solutions out there to avoid that. And I think it's in the last few years there's been really encouraging change. And plastics get a bad name out there. It's in every walk of life. We're not getting away from that. And it's how you deal with that plastic and how it's treated to keep it circular. Not just dispose of it, not like it's keeping it out of the oceans and keeping it out in the natural habitat.
Yeah, plastic gets a very bad name. For plastic itself is a brilliant product. It's lightweight, it's waterproof, it's protective, it does wonderful things. The problem is treating it as something that's disposable instead of something
that's single use. That's the
before this discussion, Graham, you were talking about something really exciting you've been reading about, haven't you? A new process for recycling it. Pyrogenesis.
Yeah,
that's really interesting.
Yeah, which can reduce plastic back to its atomic to its kind of atomic particle level using plasma gas. And I read about it being used by the US Navy for dealing with waste generated on aircraft carriers. And it's just, it looks like an amazing technology, because, when you're at sea for months on end and you've got thousands of people on a ship, you've got to find a way of being able to deal with your waste without without having to have the bin man come along and pick it up off the back of the ship. So I think that pyrogenesis looks like a tremendous invention, and hopefully, very often things that are born out of military use end up in really influencing the development of technology for civilian applications. So I think, I'm confident that we're going to see powerful shifts in technology, but I think the key message is going to be that technology alone isn't going to get us there. We have to respect the planetary boundaries. We have to respect the fact that we cannot continue just to extract. It's just not working.
Nor use things unnecessarily.
Yeah,
there's a lot of things that we don't need, that we just treat as throwaway items.
Or is it plastic? The 90% of all the plastics that ever produced are still circulating in the environment.
I can't remember the number, but it's a terrifying number.
I think we were talking previously, Nathan, about the microplastics and their pervasive.
I think we're eating about a credit card of plastic a week.
Yeah. And when you think, I know I was watching a documentary about the kind of jagged nature of these microplastics and their ability to perfectly allow toxins to hook onto them, so that you're not just ingesting necessarily the toxins that were as part of the fundamental creation of the chemistry of the plastic, but other environmental toxins are very well set to stick in there. And it's ironically, we talk about biodegradability, and actually I think in the case of microplastics, sometimes the fragmentation process actually just makes the problem even worse. So getting your head around the language and there's so much marketing and greenwash in this world, isn't there? That I think that maybe, Claire, when you're working with clients, I'm sure that they benefit from your support in trying to kind of segregate what is truth from greenwash and marketing, because it's definitely a big issue, isn't it?
Well, there's huge confusion over biodegradability and compostability, because people treat them as interchangeable words, but they're not. something that is compostable will break down into its constituent components, and it will ideally enrich the soil. It will follow that biological loop. But a lot of plastics that are compostable are made from fossil fuels. And it seems utterly pointless to take something that could be recycled and the materials reused and treat it in such a way that it can't be. And they don't add to the soil. They'll change the structure, but they don't add nutrients. A lot of degradable plastics, there were some called oxydegradable that were being marketed, and those did just break down basically into microplastics. And those have been banned in a lot of places now because of the problems they resolved, or they solved the problems they caused. But yes, there's huge confusion. I think people aren't deliberately greenwashing. They don't fully understand the terms. They don't fully understand the life cycle, because why would they? It's not part of their normal life. So it's down to everybody who can to educate and to make it easier for people to access the kind of knowledge that they need. The RAP website's doing a brilliant job on plastics, but probably most people don't know about it. That's rap.org.uk, I think. But that's done lots of research and provided lots of information, because it's a minefield. It's so confusing.
I quite like the Ellen MacArthur Foundation have their sort of manifesto, don't they? A vision of circular economy for plastic. That I think
because that started on a ship.
Yeah.
That started because she was a round the world sailor.
Yeah.
So back to your Navy one.
And the kind of the circular economics side, I think when you consider the UN Sustainable Development Goals as as part of this kind of benchmarking process, we've got the targets are all pretty clear, aren't they? They're clear and available, and I know that we have issues around national commitments to achieving those targets, and this it's not straightforward. But I just started this course in on the planetary boundaries at Stockholm Institute, and it's funny. My wife reads lots of fiction and loves to read, and I read non-fiction all the time, and most of what I read is incredibly grim and sobering. But I feel absolutely compelled. The more I read, the more I want to know. And that I mentioned earlier, the edX platform, are really, really brilliantly organised. And Stockholm Institute, if you're looking at the planetary boundaries and making sure that we bring our excesses under control before we go too far, there's some great kind of underpinning knowledge to be found there for free. So I'd really recommend that. And I think the other thing I mentioned earlier was about the Donut Economics Action Lab. What I like about that site is that it's full of case studies of, there are loads of presentations there. There's loads of case studies on cities that are, like, for example, I think Amsterdam is looking to be a circular city by 2023. The action that's taking place broadly is phenomenal. And I think for us, printers and people in our community may be a relatively small part of the overall problem, and certainly not at the top of the list for the biggest gains to be made, but just to be able to contribute. And I'm sure that, Nathan, for you, the spirit within your business of contributing to a more positive approach must be enormously motivating for your staff, and giving
it's
purpose.
Yeah, it gives you a new direction. And we've got a business to run with 30 staff, so we need to run a business at the same time as doing what we can to reduce our impact. And me being on the board of FESPA UK as well, I've openly said, whatever I find out, I'm going to pass on to the members there to help educate them as well. And likewise, if anyone can help us, if things we're not looking at, things we're not seeing, just share that information. I think collectively as an industry, we need to make the difference. And going back to what I said before, it's about people caring. you know, you could be a small print shop and just sling everything in the skip and have done with it, you know, making money and print on whatever you're printing on to get you to make a few quid. But so everyone's got to care, and it's more about being caring and being responsible for what you're doing.
Yeah,
I remember a couple of decades ago, I was working in a print company for doing an environmental management system for them, and there was a production manager who was quite unhappy naturally about the extra work that was involved, and he was at home one night just reading through stuff, and his little daughter came along and said, "Daddy, what are you reading?" And he showed her, "Daddy, you're working to save the planet." And it completely changed his mindset, because yes, it can be extra work. It usually is extra work at the beginning, but you're doing something to be proud of and to make the children proud and to give them a life.
Yeah, that's important. I'm quite lucky at ImageCo because we've got a guy who's we've kind of assigned to that, so he's working with the ISO, and the ISO is a lot of work. There's a lot of paperwork and a lot of time you have to spend on that. Whereas I can step back from production. I've got a great production team, so I can look at new materials, I can do the research, I can play around with things. And then what you've got to remember as well is, you know, we mentioned the cost of the products, and does it cost more? It does, but you can look at like R&D. We got a really good claim last year on R&D for the testing of these products. So yeah, the tax credits for keen partners. So a big part of last year's claim and the year before that was testing of the new products. So, you know, you might be spending a few hours, and they look at the operation hours, the man hours, so you can get funding. There's lots of areas where you can look at grants and everything for, you know, for a sustainable development point of view.
Brilliant. I'll tell you what, we've got a couple of questions in the Q&A. So if you're both willing, shall we move on and see what they are?
Yep, fire away.
Okay. Okay, so one of our guests, Richard Stiff, is asking if at all possible, it'd be useful to get some recommendations for recycling services to the wide format industry.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we can only speak here directly from a UK perspective, I would think. But would you have something that you could? I'm assuming that Richard is UK based, asking that question.
Well, yeah, Richard, I'll answer that one. I'm speaking with our waste management company next week. I've been speaking to a few suppliers recently, all of which operate around the UK. So I can either introduce them direct, or, you know, just have that conversation with them. And going back to what I said about the waste management, it's an idea collectively that we're going to look at that maybe as an industry. It's an idea that I'm going to talk to him about next week. But I'll give him the contact details after this, by all means. Or if to drop me an email or message on LinkedIn or whatever, and I'll help you out with that.
Brilliant. Thank you, Nathan. Claire, do you have anything to add to that question at all?
No, sounds like Nathan's been doing so much research. Yeah. Yeah.
I had a tour around a recycling factory, which was good fun. It's very smelly, but it was good.
Yeah. And there's obviously guidelines on what to look for when choosing one, to make sure they've got all the correct authorizations from the Environment Agency.
Yeah.
And duty of care and that. But yeah, finding people who suit your work, Nathan is the man there.
I've just seen the next question is from Peter Hansen, that he wants to know more about pyrogenesis enthesis, but doesn't know how to spell it. So I'll just to let you know, Peter, I had to look it up again quickly myself. So you're actually correct in that it's pyrogenesis, pyrogenesis. And is there anything more I can give you from where that's from?
There was something in the Guardian today about recycling waste and breaking it down to make vanillin, which was quite interesting too.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So I learned about pyrogenesis first from earthsquad.global. So there's hopefully that will get you there. And then we have one more question from someone we know all too well, Mr. Paul Sherfield. Hello, Paul. So Paul says that, you know, there's a great push in the industry for embellishment methods for foiling, UV varnishing, etc. And he's wondering, is this compatible with the circular approach? Now, I know that from recent seminar that webinar, sorry, that I sat in on, that Foilco is certainly doing they're doing a recycling process for the polyester transfer film that's used in foil, and I think one of some of their foils are capable of being biodegradable. But Clare and Nathan, what do you have to contribute on this one?
I mean, we don't print varnish, we print white ink. So we've got Vutec, the Vutec GS with white ink with a flatbed, which is UV LED, and we've got the 2 latexes as well. All I would suggest there is whoever your machine provider is, just speak to those guys. You being UV, I'd maybe say not, but I'm not too sure. I know if with the varnish that we've got on the Vutec, it can be recycled in certain streams, but not everything. So you really do need to check on, first of all, who the print provider is, what the ink's made up of, and the material it's going on as well. So there's several things to consider there.
Okay.
Yeah, being a traditional environmentalist, I would say it depends, because it depends on your substrate, it depends on the materials.
Yeah.
You can be creative within a framework of trying not to add lots of extra things. But if you take paper and you put UV varnish on it, that makes it hard to recycle. I'm not so sure what happens with all the different plastic polymers, substrates, things, but you need to really do a lot of research to find out whether it will be circular, both with the recycling end and with, as Nathan says, the equipment manufacturers, ink manufacturers. It adds complexity, and simple is easier.
There are a few companies out there, when I talk about innovation, who are looking at things that aren't necessarily recyclable traditionally, but they're just creating a mishmash of everything and then creating boards from it. A company called Maltings Organic in South Milford, near where I live, and they have a sister company called Reworked. They've been doing a lot of PPE from obviously the masks, and just literally crushing that up and producing boards. With these boards, you can print, well, we're trying to print directly, but they are quite difficult to print on. But I know if you've got like a big CNC, you can use that. They're making like furniture and sanitizer stations and doors for, you know, toilets and things like that. So where there's not always an option just to put a product directly into recycling, there's other options to create a new substrate that can be reused. I mean, the problem is how many times can you reuse something, and what happens to that afterwards? Where does it stop? And I know it's not infinitely recyclable. It's difficult to do so. But, you know, to give something an extra life, especially with a piece of furniture like a bench, I know that I'm doing a lot of benches. It can last for a long time. So it's a good solution. But
there's lots of park benches that are made out of plastic.
Yeah. I remember Keith Farrell from Cactus Imaging in Australia, when we were doing the opening session for FESPA's wide format innovation and trends series a couple of weeks back. You know, he was talking about millions of square meters of outdoor advertising material that he's using at end of life. It's being made into park furniture and railway sleepers, and so yeah, sometimes, you know, I suppose it's that the ideal is that you can get, when I also did one of the coffee break sessions with Covamay in Italy, you know, they were looking at recycling polyester upcycling it back to raw polymer so that they could use it again in creating their standard product, so it wouldn't be dirty waste product. I think they're doing quite well in that regard. But yeah, I suppose our prioritization wise is we reusing it meaningfully is the ideal, and then and burning it waste for energy is the least ideal. But is still, you know, arguably better than putting it into landfill, but I don't think that represents a circular.
No.
And recycled plastic park benches are great because they last a long time. They don't get, they don't wear out, but there's ultimately only so many that you need.
Yeah.
So it is not circular.
Yeah.
No, that's the thing. It's like how many, like this, I know that one company's been doing event stands from them. And then what happens afterward, you can redo the event stand and make it like a modular stand. Just get creative with it, and, you know, do something really creative. There's some really good, like, we go back to the designers out there. If they get their eyes on this type of road, they'll come up with all sorts of stuff that you can, you know, just like a, I don't know, Meccano type thing, you know, modular things. There's lots of things you can do with it, but yeah, there's only so far you can go.
And of course, if you keep adding different processes, you're using more energy for each process, you're using more materials for each process. So that again goes against the grain of holistic thinking, environmental thinking.
I'm actually quite looking forward to, in the document side of, you know, of things like our year-end report, or, you know, the printed touch points that we have with our community, looking at, instead of using foiling, using blind embossing, instead of using lamination, using GF Smith materials, and actually revealing some of the creative qualities of the material itself. And as you talked earlier, Nathan, about Zanita boards, you know, that there are so many things that you can do that with more responsible materials, and make stunning creative statement.
Yeah, Zanita's a prime example. If you look on their website, they're doing everything from event build to plinths and furniture. It's incredible what they do, and yeah, there's some really, really good. And you wouldn't even know it's made from Zanita, which is, if anybody doesn't know what that is, it's a recycled fiberboard. I think it's about 80% the density of MDF, so you've got a really strong recycled and recyclable product that you switch your PVCs and MDFs and whatnot and use there. Just have a look at the website. It's some really good stuff. And we're a recommended partner with them as well for Environmentalist.
Okay, cool. Well, look, I'll tell you what, thank you both so much for your really interesting discussion today. Sadly, that's nearly all we've got time for, so I'm going to have to draw it to a close and thank all our guests for participating, and for you, our attendees, for joining us. It's been great to have you as always. We will have our next coffee break in a fortnight's time, where we're going to be looking at something different. We've got Matthew Parker joining us, and we're going to be looking at creating personalized branding. So that'll be an interesting discussion. There's going to be some a reg link sent out in due course. And if you're interested in watching this webinar again, or recommending it to someone, then please feel free to check out our YouTube channel, FESPA TV, where it can be found from tomorrow onwards. And we will be sending a survey out, which we would really appreciate you completing. We thrive from feedback, and it's really helpful for us. So feel free to suggest topics. Tell us if you think there are things that we can improve, and we will endeavour to do so. I'm now going to share the the contact slide again, so that you've got our email addresses. I say I am. That is my very helpful colleague Kelly, who sits behind the FESPA window there, making sure everything works smoothly.
Mysterious person.
Yeah, so these are our contact details. I think it just remains for me to say thank you very much indeed to Claire for joining us again, and Nathan. We'll look forward to, Nathan, hopefully to seeing you in a couple of coffee breaks time, where we'll drill in a bit further into carbon footprinting. So yeah, in the meantime, of course, we have now to wait another month before our liberty is returned to us in a more usual way, but keep well and look after yourselves, and we'll speak soon.
Thanks, Graham.
All
Thanks, Claire. Thank you, everyone.
No worries.
Thank you. Bye,
Thanks,
everyone.
everyone.
Thanks, Kelly.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you, Kellyanne.
No worries.